After the fire had come down, I was checking out line of field and I stepped on a landmine, which traumatically amputated my right leg and completely shattered my left leg. How I was still conscious by then is what I don't understand. How I am alive today, just being alive, is what I don't understand.
This is Silent Killers, a podcast from Face to Face and the international campaign to ban landmines. In 1997, the world said enough and signed the Mine Ban Treaty, but landmines are still claiming lives in many countries around the world. In this series, we meet survivors, frontline workers, and global changemakers, all fighting for a mine-free world. From Cambodia to the Ukraine, the danger is real, the work is urgent, and the path to peace is possible. Step by step and yet still under our feet. This is Silent Killers. Well, welcome back to Silent Killers, a really important conversation that we've started to have here on this new podcast, this new series. There's going to be 10 episodes altogether. We hope you can go back and listen to what's come before. Please check out the website for more information. Sign up for the podcast. Please share it with family and friends. We couldn't be here without the international campaign to ban landmines, and we are thrilled to be having such an important conversation. And, with such a serious name to the podcast, Silent Killers, it sounds really ominous. And the truth is, folks, it is. The world is in disarray on a variety of levels, and these are serious issues that need to be talked about. But you know what? All of my guests that I've had on the show so far have also been just so much fun. Can I say that? We've had a really interesting, and dare I even say good time talking about such a serious issue. And what I love about that is every one of these people are activists and they're advocates and they're passionate and they're committed. And you know what? They love life. And our next guest falls into that category as far as I'm concerned. I've just had the pleasure of getting to know him a little bit. He's a doctor. He's a scientist, a laboratory scientist, a global leader in victim assistance. He's a fierce advocate, folks, for anti-personnel mine ban and disability rights. He's from Uganda. He's a longtime friend and campaigner of the international campaign to ban landmines. And maybe most importantly, and we're going to let him tell you about this, but he's the founder of the ASNU, which is the Amputee Self-Help Network. And the best part of all this is he's here with us today. Alex Mouniam Babazi is here with us all the way from Uganda to have a conversation about something that matters a great deal to him and to us. Alex, pleasure to have you here on Silent Killers. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me here today.
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm very privileged to have this time with you on this podcast.
So, Alex, would love to hear, personally, I would love to hear about, some of your personal story. I've been interviewing people for many, many years now, and I always like to start, if we have time, with a little bit of narrative, with a little background, with some context. And I'd love to hear a little bit about you. It sounds to me like you've been very busy over the last 10 or 15 or 20 years, doctor, advocate, scientist, campaigner. Can you talk a little bit about, who you are and even why you're here today? That would be really helpful, I think, for me and our listeners.
Most definitely. Really, my story is what leads me here, is why I'm on this conversation today. As a young man at 17 years old, I saw what was happening in the northern part of Uganda. I also wanted a way out to continue with my education. So when an opportunity to enlist in the military as football happened, I ended up in the army, but I had not specifically gone to go on the front line and fight. I had gone as a footballer with the hope of playing for the football club that was run by the Uganda People's Defense Forces as a goalkeeper. So when I reached there, I was only 17, and they told me that, you're 17, first go for basic military training, and then when you come back, you be already 18 and you join the senior team and you start training with them. The whole point was I wanted to find a way of continuing my education because I had finished secondary school for those who are familiar with the education system in Uganda. 3 months into the basic military training, the Lord's Resistance Army in northern Uganda was the highest atrocities. It was doing a lot of havoc, harm to the civilians, kidnapping young children, and so after just 3 months of training, we were taken to the front line. That's how I ended up in the army. Then that was around 2001. And 2005, one afternoon, we are now used to the fighting and chasing around the rebels. But this one afternoon, in a heated combat action, I stepped on one of the landmine. I was already a leader in my squad. I was leading a reconnaissance team. And after the fire had come down, I was checking out the line of field and I stepped on a landmine, which traumatically amputated my right leg and completely shattered my left leg. It was the beginning of a whole new chapter in my life. It was in the late afternoon. That afternoon, I never got any care other than the tourniquet I self-applied on the leg that was traumatically amputated. And then I used my inner shirt, my inner sweatshirt. I used it as a bandage. I cut it through threads and used it on my other leg to bandage it because unfortunately, my teammates who I was with were a team of six. Somehow they paid the ultimate sacrifice of soldiers, and everyone else in the area of fire was busy engaging the enemy. So I had to take care of myself for the first like 30 minutes. That afternoon, I never got to the hospital. A team decided to volunteer to take me to the nearest field headquarters. We spent the whole night on the way. The following day was the same. We finally reached the headquarters late in the night, and then I was evacuated to the hospital in northern Uganda called Lacho Hospital. And I actually reached there midnight going into the third night. How I was still conscious by then is what I don't understand. How I am alive today, just being alive is what I don't understand. But from there, the process of recovery began. Attempted suicide happened. I was devastated. I was only 22 years. I was devastated. I was hating life. I was hating everyone. Regret not wanting to talk about anyone. So in the hospital, I actually tried to end it all, but the universe was on my side. I really needed me to stay around. I would then later recover, get discharged from the hospital, and sent to some military base that they call the rehabilitation center. But really, it's not because when I reached there, I couldn't. I was still in a wheelchair. I couldn't stay in that place even for 2 months. I requested to be sent to the General Military Hospital. And when I reached in that General Military Hospital, of course, I was still going through the trauma, I was still devastated and all. I hated my life for that. I hated everyone that was blaming to have led me to that situation. It's when I decided that the only way I can stay alive in this world is if I started reading and find a way of myself getting back to school. So, yes, I bought textbooks on my sick bed because my left leg took a lot of time to heal. I started reading. Everyone thought I had lost it. I was crazy. They were like, what is this guy doing? I would later register for A-level exams that I did and I was lucky to pass. Went on to first do my diploma in medical laboratory technology. And I'm bringing my story from all that back because there's where it plays a big role in why I end up where I am today. So I started studying that diploma in medical laboratory technology. And along the way, much as I was dealing with my trauma, people around me thought I had healed, I had recovered fully. But I was still dealing a lot, still had PTSD, I had very bad phantom pain. My self-esteem was completely shattered. I couldn't walk by that time. Now I had gotten a prosthetic leg, which was very, very bad, but I'm grateful that time ICRC was there and they gave me that prosthetic leg. It's what started the journey. But it was hard that it used to make noise. And every time I would be walking and I see people looking at me, I would even stop walking. That's how bad it was.
Alex, can I just ask you a quick question, which is not going to be a quick question? First of all, your story is it's so moving. And I'm wondering too I have so many questions. And I look at you now and I can see your body language and your smile. And how do you come from there to here? And the metaphor of simple steps, one at a time. And I got goosebumps when you said, I decided the only way forward. And you said you started reading. And that to me, I want to go back and talk about how you joined the military because you wanted to play football. How innocent and brilliant and wonderful is that, And yet this is where life has thrown you, really, in a sense. And I just love that you made that decision and you said, no, I can't look that way. I need to look this way and I need to step into my future. Can you talk to that just a tiny bit?
To be honest, I wouldn't really point something that said, this is what you want. This is why you should do this. But because I loved school so much, my dream as a person was to be a doctor. That was my childhood. Even when I went to join the army to play football so that I can afford school, the whole point was you need to find a way of finishing school. So when I was on my hospital bed in pain and with a lot of time, I couldn't go back to school directly. My thoughts, I would stay at night awake and all my thoughts were focusing on that. Go back to school, go back to school. And over time, I've learned to follow my intuition for it to guide me on what I have to do next. So how do I end up being able to talk about my story, smiling, when I never shared it with anyone before all this started? So during when I was finishing my diploma, one of my uncles had a family friend whose child was in the hospital with cancer. And this child, the only solution was to amputate the leg, but the child had refused. A young girl, 14 years old at the time, she had refused. She had said, I would rather die with my leg than live without one. So my uncle had gone back to school and finished my diploma, and he was very sure I am okay, I'm fine now. But when they told me they needed me to talk to her, I went there sincerely not knowing what to say. I didn't know what I was going to say to her because myself I was still suffering. But when I reached there, I saw this helpless girl on the bed, devastated with the news that she had to lose her leg. And all I could do was share my story from the beginning, how I ended up like how I have shared with you, and told her what what I had achieved after losing my leg. And when I stood up to leave, she asked me that, but you said you lost your leg. How are you walking? So I lifted my trouser. At the time, I used to put on baggy jeans to hide the leg. I lifted my trouser and showed her, and I was like, so when this happens, you end up getting a leg like this, and you'll be able to walk and you'll be able to go back to your life. And that was really the beginning of the whole work I have dedicated my life to. That was the beginning of me supporting other landmine survivors, other amputees in the country, and other persons living with disabilities. That was the beginning of my personal healing. Just sharing that story with that strange girl. I had never, even my family, no one knew exactly. They knew he joined the army, he lost his leg. That's all they knew. But they didn't know the whole process. I had never shared it.
I think it's really brilliant and really a challenge, I think, to all of us to learn how to share our stories with others, intimate and meaningful ways. Alex, what you said is utterly brilliant. You said, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I went anyway. And all I could do was share my story. And it was all that led you up to that. And yet you still had the courage to do that. And you didn't know where it was going to go. And I just think that is just such a beautiful, relational, important, spiritual, call it whatever you want, event. Like, that is just a remarkable thing. And first of all, I hope everybody is really hearing what this means. Like, this little step forward for you is a step forward for all of us. And I think, and like you said, it was the beginning of your personal journey towards healing. I think it's remarkable what you've been able to accomplish, and the fact that you are alive. I mean, I want to ask you a little bit about that too, just if you can, before we get into some of Uganda's story. And I want to hear about the Amputee Self-Help Network and the current problems we're facing with landmines and disarmament and so on today. You said that you were on your own, and it was 3 days before you made it to the hospital, and that you had to even use your own clothes to act as bandages. I mean, how do you account for the fact that you are still alive? I can't even imagine what those 3 days would have been like, Alex.
I usually say I think I'm alive because God wanted me to stay here. The universe needed me around. That is the only reason I can give, because when I reached the hospital, even the surgeon, when they were cleaning me and cutting the uniforms off my body, the dirty uniforms, at the point I was still conscious. But he looked at the blood work they had brought, the CBC, and he was like, but you man, how are you still alive? How are you even conscious? I had been on a stretcher that was literally full of chunks of my clotted blood, but I was still alive. I was still conscious, and that helped me. That's how I ended up remaining with my left leg, which was completely fractured. Because when the consent form came in, it was to reconstruct the one that had been traumatically amputated and to amputate the other one. But I refused to sign and said, Doctor, please try and save this other leg. And I think that was the last statement I made in that hospital. So whatever everyone believes in is what made me stay around. It wasn't because of what I did. What I did was just some conscious measures of saying, because I'd been trained intelligence gathering, somehow I'd been taught on how to try and do some first aid. So that's, I think, how I am here, and I'm glad. I'm
glad you're here too, and I bet your family is pretty glad. I love that you say that the universe wanted you to stick around. And I think that's a really universal way. You know, you mentioned God. A lot of people don't believe in God, right? And so to get a sense for it, or they don't necessarily believe in the God that you or I or others may believe in. And so how do you come to terms with that? Well, there's something that said, some greater power perhaps, that said, no, it's not your time. And I think that's a really beautiful way to look at it, and a beautiful story to tell as well. Alex, how has that changed? You tell us the story about this young girl that you met, the 14-year-old girl who, and what a powerful statement. She didn't want to live life without a leg. She'd rather die with it. I mean, if that's not a powerful, powerful statement about opportunity and so on, and just how to live one's life, I don't know what is. How has all of this shaped the way that you approach medicine, the way that you approach your activism and your advocacy?
So this is what happened. When I left the hospital on my way home, in Uganda, we use what we call border borders. They are motorcycle transporting systems. So on my way home, the parents called me and they were like, what have you told this girl? I actually got scared when they asked me that. I thought, could she have harmed herself or something? I was like, no, I shared my story with her, nothing much. And then they told me, immediately you left, she called us and she was smiling and she told us to reschedule the surgery. And reaching home and reflecting on my day, because from the time I lost my leg, I developed this habit of When I reach home at the end of the day, I reflect on how I have gone through the day, and I try to understand if I have actually created anything positive in someone else's life. And when I was reflecting on that, I was like, I've never shared my story with anyone. I've been feeling bad about myself. I didn't want anyone to ask me about what happened to me. Even just someone looking at me limping and they ask, that would piss me off. That would bring all the bad memories from the time I lost my leg. But then that single moment told me that, look here, you shouldn't feel pity on yourself. If your story could potentially save someone's life, then it's best you share it. It's best you share it. And after sharing it, of course, it lifted this heavy load over my shoulder and off my shoulders. And I started feeling like, like I said, that was the beginning of my healing. And it's from that time that now I went back to the military base where very many other friends of mine had enlisted with, had been put the so-called rehabilitation center. So I went back there and started talking to them one on one. And I encouraged many who went back to school, who started doing different things other than just sitting in the military base and languishing there. And then along the way, of course, the numbers started increasing. I started seeing as many people as I could. But reaching the point of starting the organization was one time I was actually walking. I was walking in town and crossing the road, and I stepped, and my bad prosthetic leg snapped into two. I fell in the middle of the road.
Oh, wow. It's horrible.
And when that happened, the taxi drivers, the traffic users started abusing me. I hopped on one leg to get to jump on the border so I can go to the center where they were making legs to repair it. And they first refused to take me because my leg was broken, crooked, facing inside, and I was not crying in pain, and they couldn't understand that it was a prosthetic. And that is the day I reached home and I was like, okay, look at me, look here. Why do I hide this? I decided to get all my trousers and cut them into shorts. And I have been putting on shorts since then. Like my prosthetic is always in the open. And when I did that, still it was unconsciously just trying to say, okay, I think when I'm crossing the road, it should be easier for me. People should not rush me because they will see how I am. And when I started doing that, that's now when I met the biggest influx of people that actually needed my help. The amputees, not truck accidents, the amputees from diabetes, the amputees from cancer. People would even run after me to tell me that, look here, I have a relative, I have a brother, I have a sister, I have a father who lost a leg and they are not able to deal with it. Could you please come and talk to them? Because the assumption was if he's like that, then he's okay, he's healed.
You were more approachable at that point. Alex, that sort of says to me, and I think there are gaps. I've done a lot of work in Cambodia, and I've worked with amputees and landmine survivors from the Khmer Rouge and from the Cambodian army back in the Civil War days. Lots of gaps in the system. It's very difficult to get a good prosthetic leg or an arm. They're very expensive. They often come from out of country. They're not manufactured inside the country and so on. Can you talk a little bit about the state of affairs medically for amputees in Uganda today? What are some of the deeper needs and the gaps that are there in the country?
That's a very good question, and one I'm passionate about. Along the way, as I did my peer support, mental health, peer-based mental health and psychosocial support to landmine survivors and other amputees, I kept on saying that yes, I meet people and I support them mentally and they are going into the right direction, but then they don't have the assistive devices they need to gain their independence and get back on their feet. And start working and earning and stop being dependent. And so that was the first gap I identified. In Uganda, we don't have a rehabilitation system. If I must be blunt, we don't have a rehabilitative system. We were being supported mostly by non-governmental organizations, international non-profit organizations like ICRC. And when the war ended and the country was declared landmine free, they packed their bags and left. But the survivors around were still here. They still needed help because once this help happens to you, you need continuum of care throughout your life. So that was the first gap I identified.
So there just weren't local agencies, government agencies doing the work. There just wasn't the support locally. It was pretty much primarily international support. Is that right?
Yes. And that is still the case up to now. The centers that make prosthetics around are all private owned. The government facilities don't have the capacity to produce prosthetic legs, for example, for people, or even wheelchairs. It's mostly we depend on the private sector mostly to get what we need. And this drove me into a lot of thinking, and I used to network and find centers where I can take my people when they need prosthetic legs. My ears were always on the ground, trying to hear who is having some offer of giving out free prosthetic legs, because then there are some also non-profit organizations here that gather donations from Europe, and then they come and support people living with disabilities here in Uganda. So I had gone back to school, of course, did my degree in medical laboratory science, and when I had just started my degree in medicine and surgery, I went to this center with a van full of amputees who were going to get prosthetic legs, and I met there a team from Switzerland. At the time, they were also students, and they told me what they were planning. They were planning to develop a prosthetic leg, I think, as their project. And then we had a very, very long conversation. They asked me questions about how I would see rehabilitation, what I think rehabilitation should be like, about prosthetic legs and all. And then I spoke my mind and how I felt as a user and how I feel like everything should be done right. And at the end of the day, we realized that we had the same beliefs, the same values, and we wanted the same thing for the people that we are trying to impact. And then they went ahead and started developing a prosthetic leg, and I was their user consultant throughout from 2018 to 2023 November. That's when the product was actually allowed on the market to be used by humans. So around all the other work I do, I'm now also a consultant on prosthetic development, lower limb prosthetic development. And I'm very proud of that because it's the same prosthetic leg I use now. And if I'm being honest, it's my best prosthetic leg I've ever used in my entire life.
That's amazing.
All that is, I believe it is because of how it was designed, how it was developed. So that's how I end up now in also supporting mine survivors with prosthetic legs, leading them to other different places. I network with organizations like HI. We started working on a project in 2019 as well, when I had gone to one of the conferences for the Mind Ban Treaty. I went there. I was a speaker in that conference, and then before I left, I met one of the HI prosthetists. We started this idea, and a project called Limba was born from that. And Limba is meant to get like components from France, the good components that have been used for a short time, and send them to Uganda. And then we make sure that people are able to get prosthetic legs without having to sell their arm and leg. So yeah, uh, it's all that, and it's because of the numbers, the influx of numbers. After I started using putting on my shot, that's when I kept on now having people telling me, you know what, you're being overstretched, because I used to use my own money to go visit patients in hospitals, in their homes, in their communities, and in different districts of the country. So people kept on telling me, why, how about you start up an organization so that you can find other people to support you doing the work you're doing. And that's how the Amputee Self-Help Network Uganda, in short, ASNU or SNU, was born. And yeah, I've never looked back since then.
It's amazing, Alex. I wonder if you could talk really briefly about your thoughts on how this intersects with other bigger issues. You know, my work has been in international development for many, many years, and I wonder poverty, disability, inclusion, healthcare, education. How does it get in the way of people? I mean, clearly you've been able to do some really incredible things, and you've been able to share your story over and over. You've been able to pursue your own sort of healing, but also been a part of, I would imagine, many other people's healing as well, not just physically but also mentally, I would think. So I just wonder how, I mean, if it's still a challenge for people that are amputees in the country, landmine survivors and so on, it must be having an impact in other ways as well. And I wonder if that you could help us understand that a little bit as well.
You see, why I am passionate about this is because of the things I see, because of the things I see among landmine survivors, among other people living with disabilities. Because we don't have a proper rehabilitation system, I believe if anyone is properly rehabilitated in the right time, they are able to regain their independence, and they are able to find a way of earning, and able to reduce at least at the level of poverty. But I still find a huge challenge when I have good Samaritans who are offering like free prosthetic legs, for example, and I call someone and invite them. I tell them, I know you don't have a prosthetic leg. Are you able to come to this place so that they can give you a free leg? And I am telling them, you'll be sheltered, you'll be given food until you get your prosthetic leg and leave. And someone will tell you, I'm very sorry, I don't have transport to come. And that alone tells you how bad it is.
How challenging it really is.
Yeah. Yesterday I just came back from Eastern Uganda. I'd been there for a whole week. The company I partnered with to develop a prosthetic leg, I am very happy that they looked at what I was doing, and somehow it also influenced how they do their work. So they also look for people who can donate some prosthetic legs. So I was in Eastern Uganda, and Sacoleg had organized, we call it Freedom of Mobility Package, and we were fitting there 5 people. And one of the people I had there is a survivor from Padel in northern Uganda, and to get her there was troublesome, just to come and get a leg. So things I see every day, it's rotten legs I see when I go to the communities, and you see someone still trying to hold on to a leg they have used for 20, 30 years. They have tried to repair it and refurbish it with car tire, rubber, strings, and metals. And then it is also giving them other amputation related illnesses like scoliosis. Their backs are bending. So landmines leave a devastating legacy of poverty, not just in the direct victims, but also among the indirect victims. But because imagine a parent who is supposed to fend for their kid, they have lost their leg, they don't have proper rehabilitation, That means they won't work and the kids will not go to school, and that is a generational devastating event that happened just because someone chose to use an indiscriminate weapon that is supposed to target soldiers, but it ends up hurting civilians and children.
Yeah, the implications, it's we call it the splash and ripple effect, right, Alex? I mean, there's just so many things, it seems, that are connected to these issues that make a difference. And just something as simple as, well, it's not simple, but something as an attitude towards a discrimination or transportation or one factor, never mind a layer of factors, right, that can work against you when you're vulnerable like this. And I think your story just needs to be heard by so many people, Alex. So again, thank you for sharing it with us here today. I'd love for you to talk a little more about the Amputee Self-Help Network in Uganda. And so that's something you saw a direct need, and maybe that can help us as we get a little closer here to the end of our interview. And I'm looking forward to being able to meet with you at some point down the road, Alex, and maybe we can hear more about your story as well. And there is a summit coming up. Are you going to be going to that, by the way? Are you going to be at that summit in December?
Yeah, most likely. I have my medical internship, the internship I'm supposed to do for a whole year to be able to get a license to practice medicine. It starts in August, but I will see if I can talk to my leaders at the hospital to allow me to go for that. Because much as I did medicine, which was my childhood passion, but I feel like the work I'm doing with survivors, with amputees, with persons living with disabilities, with ICBL is equally important because, yeah, I'm also passionate about it. So hopefully I will go.
Hopefully you'll be there, and that's happening in Geneva in December. I'm hoping to be there as well, and maybe even showing a film that I've made called Broken Courage about a man that I met in Cambodia who I'm sure you and him, his name is Soon. I'm sure you and him would have stories to tell one another. And he, like yourself, has become an advocate, a landmine survivor, and has quite a story to tell. And I've been able to make a film about his story and about the country of Cambodia and so on. And part of the reason why I'm here, I was in Siem Reap for the summit in November last year, and talk about a life-changing experience. So, Alex, tell us about ASNU, a little bit about its work, and how's this? If you had a magic wand, Alex, if you could wave a magic wand, what is one of the things that you would ask for with your work with ASNU? What is it that you need most?
I would have a comprehensive rehabilitation center. If I could have anything, I would have a comprehensive rehabilitation center that provides holistic care to amputees in general, not just landmine survivors, but to all amputees. And what I mean from this is from the surgical part throughout to the vocational part where they are equipped with skills to be reintegrated back into the community as independent and people that are able to earn an income. What I mean is to be able to have a choice of what adaptive sports they can get involved in. I would have a center that provides everything from the surgical part to that end and everything in the middle. If I had a magic wand to say, let this happen, that would happen.
That would happen. Comprehensive, holistic, in one place. So tell me about your work with ASNU and how you're working towards that center.
Yeah, so Amputee Self-Help Network Uganda was born out of the passion to support other people, out of the passion to create a shelter for landmine survivors and other people living with amputation, because it took me many years to start even recognizing that I'm recovering now from what happened to me. And when I started healing, I was very sure I needed to do this to ensure that other people that are going through the same don't take as much time as I took to heal. Because I am now 43 and I just finished my medical degree. I finished it last year in August. But I am very, very sure if someone had spoken to me in 2005, I wouldn't have taken that much time to reach a point of making a decision. Because even when I went to do medical laboratory science as a degree, my mind, my still recovering mind, had told me that this is the closest you will ever get to practicing medicine, because you're not going to be able to stand. You're not going to have to afford to manage the long hours in the theater, in the ward round. But after healing, again, now I kept on feeling that vacuum inside me of being unfulfilled. And that's why I went to do medicine and surgery. So Asin was born to make sure that that doesn't happen to as many people as at least we support those we can for when we can, because it's a resource intensive activity that we do. We have to move a lot. We go to communities, we visit people in their families. So, and our slogan is sharing is healing. And that is also born from the fact that when I started sharing my story, that's when I started registering some recovery myself.
When you started, I love that you talked about your still recovering mind. And you know what, Alex? I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, because I think most of us are recovering from something, aren't we? You know, I really believe that on some level, I really do. And I think we all share that. And of course, some people's situations are much more extreme and much more vulnerable and difficult than others. There's no question about it. But whether it's mental health issues or physical or issues of poverty and so on, we're all recovering. And I think if we could remember that sometimes, and thanks for the reminder, it might make things a little easier. And by the way, congratulations on finishing your schooling. That's incredible. You've got an intern still, but boy, that's something to be celebrated. That is something to be celebrated. And I want to just do a really quick shout out too for you, Alex. It's for our listeners, it's asnufoundation.org. They can find out more information, not only about you and your story, but links to social media feeds and so on and so forth. And so one of the things that has stood out to me, Alex, is, comprehensive, holistic victim care. Basically, you are providing resources for all those in need, really. And so it seems like the need is great. Can you talk about that a little bit more, and the frustrations, but also maybe some of the joys that you're sensing and feeling with the work that you're doing?
Yes, so ASNUO Amputee Self-Help Network Uganda, we, like you've said, our focus is on providing victim assistance where the government is not fulfilling their mandate, because ideally, according to the Mine Ban Treaty, this was clearly put up to the governments, the state parties, to ensure that the victims of mines and other unexploded remnants of war are taken care of by the government and included within the mainstream policies. But we came to realize that this was not the case, and our people were suffering with not just missing proper rehabilitation, but also missing on the other services they need to get as people living with disabilities as a result of mine incidences. So we decided to start providing these services with the main objective at the beginning being peer-based mental health and psychosocial support. However, along the way, we realized that that was not enough. You provide support, psychological support to someone, and then you realize they need a prosthetic leg that they don't have. We also don't have the resources to be able to provide these prosthetics, but at least we have made networks that help us support one person at a time, 2, 3, here and there. And the dream is to ensure that everyone is properly rehabilitated, they are properly reintegrated into their societies, and they become productive members of their communities. So that is really, in a nutshell, what we focus on as an organization. And I should say that it gives me a lot of joy because I see the difference we are creating. I see the networks we have made, the partner organization we have, like Stand, we work together from the UK, like Sacoleg from Switzerland, the Swiss East African social enterprise, who have also projects that help us get prosthetics to these people that need them. And without the networks and the partnerships we have recently also started another partnership with Humanity and Inclusion. Without these partnerships, we wouldn't be able to do the work we do. We wouldn't be able to support the people we support. We would still be going there, we meet them, we support them mentally, but we leave them miserable because they cannot get back on their feet.
Alex, it sounds, you're talking about hope and celebrating some of the wins and partnerships. It sounds like the community for not only those that are vulnerable, those that are victims, those who have those deep physical and psycho and social needs, but are a part of a bigger community. And
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what that means, not only for you personally? Like, for instance, this is a partnership between a podcast that I started years ago called Face to Face with the International Campaign to Ban Landmines. This would never have happened had I not traveled to Cambodia and met a man who was a landmine survivor. And isn't that an incredible thing when you and I are sitting here, different continents, talking about this issue that matters to the world? You and I would never have met if I hadn't met this man, Soon Ratena, 20 years ago. And I just think that's an incredible thing as the community grows. Can you talk about that a little bit because you're an activist, right? That's why you started this, really, isn't it? Because you cared. And I guess maybe buried in all of that for me, Alex, is how do we get people to care about these issues as we try to grow this community bigger?
Thank you very much, David, for that observation. It so happens to be an unfortunate turn of events that it's now a big community of campaigners, of landmine survivors, all being created by the unending conflicts we have in our world, the use of these indiscriminate weapons that we see being used. It's a community that have been created by unfortunate circumstances. And for us who are the members of the community, who are in the deep in the gutters, so to say, of where these people are living, where we see the suffering happening day to day, it's upon us for us, me, yourself, the other people at ICBL who have the voice to try and be representatives of the bigger community that has no chance of raising their voice, so that the world gets to understand that what is happening is not just. Using these weapons is not just. Using them against civilians because they plant them to attack soldiers, but eventually it's the civilians that suffer. And that's how this community of survivors, of activists, of campaigners come up, because we are all focusing on a similar objective of ensuring that we stop this. We don't want this community to grow any bigger. We want to try and keep where it is and support, because even the people who are within the community don't have enough resources to support them, for them to be able to live day after day. So why should we increase this community by using the same weapons that created the community in the first place, and yet we can actually minimize it to where it is right now? So for me, my call to the entire world, to whoever lands on this video, is to join us. Let our voice be as loud as possible, so that the people who are still manufacturing and are still intending to use, the people who are leaving the treaties and making it weaker, think twice before they make their decisions.
So as we wrap up our conversation here, Alex, and again, I'm looking forward to learning more about your story. And I think I asked you earlier, or maybe it was offline when we were back and forth, but I do hope that there's a book that's going to be written at some point about your story if it hasn't already been published. I'm looking forward to that, and I hope our listeners are going to do the same. I'm asking people, of course, to continue to listen to this podcast, Silent Killers, to spread the word about that. What can people do not only in Uganda itself, but who are interested in the Amputee Self-Help Network Uganda, the ASNU? By the way, again, folks, that's asnufoundation.org. Is there a newsletter they can sign up for? Can they donate there? What's the best way for people to get involved in Uganda and the work that you're doing?
The best way is to reach out to us. Like I said, I think at the beginning of this podcast, I said, you asked me if I had a magic wand, what would I want?
A magic wand.
Yeah, the dream is to have a center, a comprehensive, holistic rehabilitation center where it is not only about providing peer-based mental health and psychosocial support, not only just providing prosthetic limbs, but also equipping these individuals who have survived landmines and are living with disabilities with other skills that will help them become productive members of their communities and able to provide for their families, because we realize that most of the times the people who suffer the consequences of these explosives, the people who suffer the consequences of road traffic accidents that lead to amputations, are people who actually do the casual work. If they don't work that day, that means they don't eat. Most of them don't have formal education. So imagine what happens when that person has lost the abilities to do the casual work they are supposed to do. To me, rehabilitation would mean that after doing all the other work, the medical, the physical rehabilitation, skill these people so that they also go out there and provide for their families and also contribute to the economy of the country. But also we have children. These children were interested in athletics. They were interested in football. They were interested in different types of sports. But when this happens, it takes them aback. And to me, I feel like if I have a center, one of the other things I would have there is a center that actually introduces these people to adaptive sports, so that someone doesn't feel like losing a leg, losing an arm, being blind, having a spinal injury takes them off life, stops them from ever getting involved in any physical activity. And to me, if I had a magic wand, that is what I would have in Uganda. That is what I would have in East Africa, to see that all these communities, all these people that we meet are able to live their lives to the fullest.
Yeah, I love that you're really talking about human potential, Alex, aren't you? And the whole notion of adaptive sports is being able to step in a way that's meaningful for us, for your team, for your community, and so on. Maybe the last question for now, Alex. How do you stay smiling? How do you get out of bed and remain hopeful every day? I know that this has been a thread throughout our conversation, and I really think it's a thread through the whole series. Again, just as a reminder to our listeners, we're doing 10 episodes of Silent Killers. It's going to be about the history. It's going to be about very personal stories like yours in Uganda and so on. And it's going to be about campaigning and advocacy. But the main thing I think that people are going to take away from this is that, yes, these are difficult times politically and so on, but there is hope. I'd love for you to offer up an affirmation and a little bit of a challenge to our audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so really what keeps me smiling is the fact that I came out on the other side alive, healthy, stronger than ever, and able to achieve what I have achieved. What keeps me smiling is that I know I'm waking up, I'm going to the hospital, and I'm going to help someone who really needs my help, knowing that I'm going to receive a phone call the following day and they will be telling me about someone who recently lost a leg and they need my help. And I know that meeting them will change their lives. That's what keeps me smiling. But it's not easy to do that because I know for sure from experience, I know that people you see that have lost their legs, people you see that have gone blind in adulthood, these people are not really disabled, so to say, as how people want to look at them. We are just missing this bridge of proper rehabilitation. Proper rehabilitation is the only obstacle that is in between them and the people who are able-bodied, who are able to do everything. With proper rehabilitation, that gap is closed. And the challenge in that is that the resources are not there. For example, in Uganda, you even tell someone you have an offer of a free prosthetic leg, and you tell them, can you travel to this center? And they give you a leg. But someone will tell you, I don't have transport. And that is after trying and networking and finding ways of making sure that they can get, let's say, a leg or a wheelchair. So the challenge is mostly resources. But with resources, I would say we would start seeing more productive people who have survived these incidences and living their lives without any limitations.
Well, and you're talking about closing the gap and building bridges, and what a great way to wrap up this conversation. I wish we could keep it going, and I'm going to encourage those listening to check out the website once again, and I'll bring it up again, but it's asnufoundation.org. Alex, what a pleasure having you on the show for this episode. It's been great getting to know you a little bit. I look forward to meeting you maybe in Geneva in December, and keep up the good work. You are doing a brilliant job. And it's, like I said, it's been a real thrill and pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you to everyone that will look at this. Looking forward to see it go places.
Same.